Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our subject today, Internet addiction. Believe it or not, there is such a thing, Internet addiction. And with us to talk about it, David Lacocque. Dr. Lacocque is a past lecturer at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. He is a psychologist at the University of Wisconsin Counseling Center, and he is a frequent presenter on Internet addiction. Welcome, David. What caught your attention about this subject? Why the interest?
Well, you know, this is a subject that I think has caught clinicians' interest, school counselors' interest, the general public. It's hard to not be interested in the Internet. It's probably about half of people's experience nowadays, for better or for worse. I think it got my attention because in my position at UW-Madison, I had an advisor say to me that he was noticing a lot of students were getting in trouble, failing out of school, and that advisor noticed that excessive use of the Internet seemed to be a culprit. So I was asked to put together a presentation. That was 7 years ago, and since then I've found that it's a topic I can't stay away from.
Wow. You say half of people's lives are on the Internet?
Well, it's estimated, for example, that 35 hours a week is the amount of time that 18 to 21-year-olds are spending on the Internet.
I assume this is college age, but if you talk about a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, it goes down as they get older?
The course of people's lives and how it fluctuates as far as Internet use, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly. But for youngsters, teenagers, and young adults, if not the majority, a sizable number of hours, between 20 and 35 hours, people are spending online for all kinds of things.
How much of that is recreational, goofing off time, and how much of that's like their homework or working time?
Well, there is research that's looked at this question in a lot of different ways. Teenagers use the Internet mostly for social networking. Mm-hmm. They use it for text messaging. They use it for live chats. And, of course, the Internet is also invaluable for people who have, let's say, a medical condition and want to be an empowered patient. Right. You can learn everything there is to know about diabetes before you go see your doctor. So this isn't a half hour where you're going to hear me say all kinds of terrible things about the Internet. But rather, I think I'm here to tell you about the ways that some people get themselves in trouble with it.
You know, I think it's very hard not to go to that subject about just the Internet in general and harms to people, but let's do our job. We're here to learn about Internet addiction, and if we have time, we'll get to the other stuff. What constitutes Internet addiction versus just you use it a lot?
Well, that question kind of reveals a little bit about where the state of the art is. Namely, it's early on. There's a DSM work group. The DSM, as you know, is just the manual that people like me use to make diagnoses. And that work group is deciding as we speak whether to include Internet addiction in the new revised edition. There's a good chance it won't be included. And the reason, getting to your question, is that there's not an excellent or kind of absolute consensus about what Internet addiction really is. Some of the criteria that are proposed, though, have to do with criteria that are really similar to pathological gambling and substance abuse. So I could go through a list of some of those if you'd like.
I'd like it.
Okay.
I think we need to hear it.
Well, tolerance and withdrawal. Those are sort of the standbys when you talk about alcohol dependence. Well, it turns out that for a lot of people, to achieve what's sought after, whether it's some pleasurable experience or some distraction, that it takes people increasing amounts to achieve the same effect. If I'm a stressed out person, I might take 5 minutes online and feel like, hey, that felt good, I'm not stressed anymore. But as human beings, we tend to habituate to things, not just chemical things that our brains adjust to, but experiences or processes like the Internet. So if in 2 months you talk to me, I might say, well, I feel stressed, but it takes a good half hour before I get that experience I need. Withdrawal has also been shown. People get agitated, they show signs of depression when they have gotten into a true addiction and they stop cold turkey. Other common signs are preoccupation, so even when I'm not online, let's say I have a problematic Internet pattern in my life, all I'm thinking about is when I'm online next or something that happened online. So you see, experientially, I'm never offline. People deceive other people. So if my spouse asks me, you came home late from work, what were you doing? Let's say I was chatting with friends remotely. I might lie to her and say, oh, I just had some loose ends to tie up at work. Mood modification. This is a big one because people figure you have to ingest a substance in order to get a euphoric or other kind of psychological effect, but it's not true. On the internet, people can just toggle the mouse and immediately get a squirt of dopamine, get the experience of something pleasurable or something that's sought after. So there's no doubt that among people who get into problematic patterns, the mood modification, from feeling dysphoric to feeling pleasantly taken away, feeling relieved, is really a cornerstone of the problem.
I watch TV. That's one of my drugs of choice. Candy's the other. Now, if I sit down and watch TV for an hour and I'm stressed before I watch TV, and I'm not even talking about PBS and something very intellectual, I'm talking about entertainment. After an hour, I feel better. Is that similar to what you're talking about with the internet?
Well, that's really an interesting point. There are all sorts of human activities that make us feel better. And so people might even say, well, anything could be addictive. So is it the same? Well, it's a little bit the same in the sense that you can, if you have cable, choose among hundreds of channels. The difference, however, is on the internet you've got infinite channels. So the menu is not exhaustible. There also are other dimensions of cyberspace that are different from the television experience, which we can get into. But in terms of the effect, you might be onto something, that to turn on the TV gives you that moment of distraction, it takes you away, and you're better for it in the short term, no harm done.
By the way, I've noticed for me, I bet it's true for a lot of people, I'll watch an hour, if I turn it off right there, I feel better. I feel like my stress is reduced, I've distracted myself from things that bother me. If I leave it on for 3 hours, which I usually don't, I feel lousy.
I can tell you just from my clinical experience, and by the way, I'll cite where I can research to answer some of your questions, but it's at a young stage at this point, and a lot of the information out there is anecdotal. It's coming from clinicians like myself. I regularly ask students at the University Counseling Center where I work, after you've gone on a binge of 8 hours on the internet, or even 2 for that matter, do you feel better? I already know the answer before asking because I've asked it dozens and dozens of times, and the answer is always no. I don't feel better. Wow. In fact, oftentimes people say that they feel a cognitive dullness, they feel tired, and so there may be something about the glowing screen that actually takes energy unwittingly because it seems effortless to be online. Right. But when the glowing screen turns off, there's a kind of, I don't want to say withdrawal, but there's something that frequently students tell me is not pleasant. Here's the problem. The fix is easy. Turn back on the computer. And this is where we get into very late logons, 4 in the morning. Then we've got missed classes. Then we've got stress about missed classes. And now what can that student do to feel better? And this is a scenario that I hear about a lot.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about here, I keep coming back to this analogy. I'm talking about TV because more people can relate that than internet addiction. I've heard the average American watches something, has a TV on 6 hours a day or something incredible. And yet I don't think of Americans as all addicted to television.
Well, there's a few things about the internet that really are different, and they shouldn't be thought of as similar to television, even though they're both on a glowing screen, as I said. Now, TV shows can be streamed through the internet, so that actually could be one form of internet use. But some of the things about the internet that have been theorized as sort of the hooks, why is it different than, let's say, the TV, and why isn't there TV addiction that we're talking about? Al Cooper studied cybersex addiction, which is just one kind of addiction online. And he developed a model that I think is useful in thinking about all kinds of internet addictions. He calls it the AAA engine. So what are the 3 A's? One is accessibility. The internet is all around. Your TV, well, you've got that at home. Maybe you've got a TV in the restaurant where you go and have lunch or something like that. But every dorm on campus, every office, every building you go by, every cafe, it's wired. It's anonymous. Yeah. Something else happens online than on TV, whereas on TV, it's you sitting across from an episode, you're a passive participant. Online, though, because you are anonymous, there's this disinhibition. People get to do and be things.
Which reminds me, I heard about this site where you can play a different character. There's 12 million people around the world who are on this site. There's avatars. I can't, do you know the name of what I'm referring to?
Well, these are multiplayer games. I don't know the one you're referring to.
Okay.
But
you can take on an identity.
that's right.
And I have heard that some people do this 3-4 hours a day, and this becomes more their life than their life. Because this identity becomes your career, you get a mate, you get a family, you live out all the trials and tribulations of life through this artificial life. And that intrigued me to hear about that.
Well, think about the difference. If I'm a person who feels a little sad and lonely, let's say, and I want to find a video at the video store that's going to pick me up, I don't know about you, Dick, but for me it's trial and error. It's hit or miss. I may not find that movie that transforms my mood. On the other hand, online, through that avatar, I can create myself in any image I want. I'm now not the viewer of a movie, I'm the creator. And I can now get responses from other people that I've pre-selected. I can make myself big and strong if I want people to think that of me. I can make myself infinitely handsome. I can make myself wise. I can make myself... And so this is the difference, or one of the differences between the internet and these kind of avatar games as opposed to the television.
So we've got, in this country, 300 million people, so each one can find just the right spot versus a choice of 60 channels on your cable where you can never find anything good anyway.
That's right.
Right. So is there a personality that you see, a personality profile, who is subject more than the average person to this addiction?
That's a very good question. I can say a couple of things about that. First of all, related to your question, there's been studies by epidemiologists just trying to look at the frequency of this or that disorder in the general population. And to put that in perspective, we're talking about 6% or so is a conservative estimate.
Of the people addicted or the people who could be addicted?
6% of the general population at any given time meets the proposed criteria for internet addiction.
They're addicted. 6% are addicted?
That's right.
That's 1 out of 16, my math tells me. Of
Yeah.
every... Wow.
And that is just about the same as the frequency of people in the general population who suffer from alcohol abuse and major depression. It's twice the number of people that suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. But it's also 6%. So we're not talking 50%. I don't want
Well, that's still huge. That's as many people as are addicted to alcohol?
That's right.
Is this as problematic as an alcohol addiction?
In terms of the kinds of impairments, that's the word that that people in my field use. What are the impairments caused? Well, with alcohol, you see a whole list of very serious consequences in health, physical health, in relationships, job, social life. And those same kind of outcomes can certainly occur on the internet. If you do an internet search, for example, on internet addiction, you'll find all kinds of news stories, including one, a Chinese couple who left their real-life baby unattended, who ended up dying. And they were at a virtual cafe, the couple, raising, of all things, a virtual baby. Now, this is a shocking story. It's the kind of thing that makes publicity and headlines. But there is a level of judgment, there's a level of impairment that can come with internet addiction that's very serious. You can look across countries. You can look in Germany, in China, in Amsterdam, right here in the U.S., and there are internet addiction centers that are opening. I think that's just one sign of the fact that this has reached epidemic proportions.
Well, it would seem to me it's not as bad as alcohol addiction for this reason. When you're on the internet, okay, you're doing your thing on the internet and you're not being responsible in the rest of your life, but you're not drunk when you're not on the internet. You don't go to work internet drunk. So I would think it wouldn't be as harmful.
It would be difficult for me to put those two disorders in a hierarchy of which is worse. I can certainly say that in my work with students or other clients who have alcohol problems, they're very serious, including life-threatening. So I don't know if making a one-to-one comparison is really that that doable. What I can say is that at the very serious end of impairments related to the internet, people, including very successful people, are losing their jobs. People are losing their marriages and their partnerships. And certain physical health problems result because of lack of sleep, which is a central and very common co-occurring problem, poor nutrition, and then the problems that come with sitting in front of a screen for many hours.
Which is what?
Eye strain, carpal tunnel, back pain. These kinds of problems also emerge over time.
When you treat people with internet addiction, what is the typical pattern in terms of, I know everyone's different, but an average number of hours a day people are on the internet that are in this category?
That's a very good question, and I think that that's maybe the wrong question.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I've tried, and researchers have tried, to find a kind of threshold number. What is that number? I think a pretty good guess is if someone's saying, I'm spending 20 hours a week recreationally doing non-essential things on the internet. Wow, that's like a part-time job. That must be impairing. But that's actually not the case a lot of the time. What seems to be more important are a few things. What is the nature of the internet use? So, is it something that directly is at odds with, let's say, a relationship I'm in? Is there infidelity happening? Another is, am I frequenting auction houses like eBay and spending money I don't have? Another is just good old overuse, and I think that's the question you're asking. When it interferes with my ability to go to bed so I can wake up for my job, which I have to do at 7:30, that's a problem. But it may be that my use on the internet is only from midnight till 3. That's problematic, even if it's only 3 hours a day.
What's happening to this person you see? They're using it too much, and they can't get off at night. It's like 1 in the morning, they know they have to go to sleep, but they just can't turn it off?
One of the things that I really want to emphasize is that, if we're trying to sort out who gets in trouble with this, it's those people, on average, who use the internet for coping. People go online recreationally, and it can evolve into a problem. But if you're looking for a single predictor of what is the condition that sets people up for problematic use, it's those people who say, I use it to change my mood because I don't like my mood. It's people who say, I don't like my life, and so I'm going to create something online I like better. These are the people that we should all be paying attention to, and then those are the ones that tend to get into problematic or compulsive patterns of use.
Same profile of the person who might become addicted to drugs?
Potentially.
I mean, if it sounds like it. I mean, what would be different about that profile of the internet addicted versus the drug addicted?
Well, I think that the profile of the internet addict, so to speak, is absolutely impossible to pin down because of the fact that for individuals who are in the lower socioeconomic end of the spectrum, the internet is still accessible. There can be high stress. Then there are the very wealthy who are corporate CEOs, also have high stress. But notice that stress I mentioned in both ends of the socioeconomic spectrum. College students, the number one every year, twice a year, students across the country are surveyed. What's the number one thing that gets in the way of your academics? Students are asked. Stress. It's probably not a surprise then that internet and computer use is moving up the ladder. Right now it's number 6. Students are saying that's the 6th leading cause of academic impairment is my computer, gaming, and internet use.
Okay. What's the first 5? Got to ask.
Yeah. Well,
can you reel them off?
I think I can reel off a handful of them anyway. The one that's physical in nature is cold or flu.
Okay.
Anxiety, which is considered a little bit different than stress. Depression actually gains and loses position over internet addiction. It's about 6 or 7. Work, so students that have 20-hour-a-week jobs to pay for school, that also ranks highly.
If someone is internet addicted and they own up to that, what is the treatment of choice?
Great question. You know, psychologists and social workers and counselors try to pin down, what treatment for what disorder. And at the same time, we realize we're not treating disorders, right? We're treating people. So here's what I can tell you from the research literature. I'm aware of one outcome study where they took people with internet addiction, gave them a specific treatment, and saw if they got better. They used cognitive therapy in this research study, and they looked at a bunch of variables like social functioning and job functioning and just general well-being. And cognitive therapy is a type of therapy that's been well researched. It helps people change their thinking patterns, and it tends to produce good results. It seems that there are favorable results showing cognitive therapy helps for people with internet addiction. And it makes sense.
Well, let me ask you this. So I'm coming to you, Doc, and I am on the internet all the time. Can't seem to get off. How are you going to change my thinking so I get off? What cognition should I change?
Well, I think there's a list of cognitions we could talk about. But my first question to you, if you're my client, is tell me more about your internet use. Let's understand what you get out of using it. Why is it so important? In some ways, why is it so wonderful? We'll get to the parts that are of concern. So what we're getting into here are a little bit of the nuances of how do you develop trust and how do you build a relationship and get people to tell you the truth and reflect on what's going on. But in terms of the thoughts, people sometimes think of the internet as a reward. I've had a long day. And so that thought of, I need a reward in the internet, that's a thought that's worth taking a look at. Another thought that might be is...
Well, hold on. If someone thinks it's a reward, what's wrong with their having a reward and doing that?
Well, for the majority of people, it's not a problem. And what I think we're all trying to figure out is why is it that for a subgroup of people who use it as a reward, it turns into problems?
So what is the thought you try to change? If they're thinking it's a reward, how do you change that thought? Or what do you do?
Well, the advantage I have is that when someone's come to my office saying, I've got a problem, we're already in agreement that there are things that aren't working. So I might be able to say to the person, tell me about the things that you do for pleasure in your life, because you feel miserable a lot. And the person says, well, I like to play World of Warcraft, I like to surf the net, I like to chat online, and I'm in online forums. And I say, well, what else do you like to do? Well, in my free time, that's all I've got time to do, because I've got 14 things going on online. And it doesn't take much prompting for me before the person starts to realize, oh, I got one leg to my stool. So some of the things that help a lot in treating internet addiction is really just getting people to do things that maybe they formerly enjoyed. I used to play racquetball or golf, or I used to read books for fun, or I used to spend time with my friends in real time. What I've just described, by the way, this tendency that the internet has sometimes to displace all these other activities and people, it's called the displacement hypothesis. And there's a strong argument for the displacement hypothesis. The internet just crowds out the necessary time to cultivate other enjoyable activities.
Is it possible once you start doing this and these other activities get replaced, that the internet becomes even more seductive because you don't have anything else going and you don't have stuff to offer to the other area because you've lost your skills at that or your mojo?
Well, in a way, your question reminds me of the question, do social skills developed online translate?
Yes.
Or is there something that happens online that's transportable, to real-time relationships? I mentioned the displacement hypothesis. The competing hypothesis is called the stimulation hypothesis. That is, what happens online augments or stimulates face-to-face relationships. So here's one of the distinctions. We get into the question of what is the person doing online. If the person is IMing, they're instant messaging with their existing friends, there's reason to believe, anecdotally and in the research, that does promote real-time, face-to-face relationships. That's one of the great uses of Facebook. On the other hand, if someone's telling me I use those 12 hours recreationally in different online forums, usually that's with people that are not known to the user. Okay. So how that would carry over into face-to-face isn't quite as clear.
I've been waiting for this question. If you're a lonely person before the internet came about in your life, and you are on forums on the internet, are you better off or worse off? Let's say you're on 4 hours a day doing that.
Well, I guess if I answer it depends, you're not going to be satisfied.
I'll accept that, as long as you amplify.
Let me try to amplify it just a little bit. The odds are in your favor, or let me put it this way, the odds are against you that being online is going to be helpful if you're a lonely person who's also socially phobic.
Mm-hmm.
Because that sets you up as somebody who has a kind of tension or anxiety in his or her life. And the internet, the hooks of the internet are more tantalizing, the reinforcement and so forth. On the other hand, let's say you're a lonely person who is lonely because he hasn't met people yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's different. The internet is a terrific way to meet people. I go online myself to find out where there are musicals or plays or comedy shows. Facebook, although I'm not on it.
But I'm asking really if you're using it as a forum, not to meet new people live, but your friends are all on the internet in forums like you were talking about before, where you're anonymous. And you were lonely, but now you don't think of yourself as lonely. And let's say you are socially phobic.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this a good thing? You feel better.
Sure. I'm online, it's my virtual living room, and I got all my friends there.
And before, you were scared to death to talk to anybody. You got too anxious, and you've had social phobia since you were 6.
Yep. That might be a good use of the internet.
But you're saying if you're not socially phobic, you just don't have friends, and you're impatient to have someone to talk to, and you use this for artificial friends, virtual friends only, then you're missing the opportunity to have real friends. Is that what I'm hearing?
What you just described might limit the chances I have to use the internet to meet people for dinner or in social settings.
Can the internet provide those needs just with virtual friends?
Sure. Yeah, imagine a day when, we just have all our friends online.
Yeah.
And we have forums and virtual restaurants and we eat in front of our TV tray and we say hello through Skype and that kind of thing. Is that the world we're talking about?
No, that's even real people on Skype.
Okay.
But I'm wondering where this becomes just kind of a psychotic joy.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? You have a strange reality, but you're not unhappy.
That may be fine. And let me just imagine a sort of until. So that person, however, may need to leave his living room to go to work. Or that person may have some existing relationships, albeit few, that begin to atrophy. Those are the directions it would go toward problematic use. But I'll absolutely grant you that it's conceivable somebody would spend many, if not most, of their waking hours online without a complaint.
So it's when it becomes a problem and your life, sort of like an alcoholic, your life is out of control or something because of the internet.
Yeah.
The 12 steps, is there any application to internet addiction the same as other addictions?
Well, in alcohol abstinence, for example, which the 12-step model promotes, we do run into a problem because you can't abstain from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of a higher power, the idea of being powerless can have some value. But what has to happen is that instead of abstaining from the internet completely, what we abstain from are problematic uses of the internet. So let's say that there's a particular forum or chat room I get lost in, and I do things and say things and wind up feeling guilty, and my goal now is to abstain from that. The abstinence model or the AA 12 steps could have great application.
Final question. Your partner, your best friend, or was your best friend, you think fits the model that you're talking about. What do you do?
Great question. It would have been easier if you'd asked if someone thinks they have a problem, because of course it's difficult when someone has no awareness that there is a problem, and you want to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey. So I guess a couple common sense things are to start from a place of concern and compassion. I like to introduce difficult conversations by asking permission. Hey, listen, if I thought there was some concern that I saw, would you be willing to hear what I had to say? The person says, yeah, okay. Now I've asked permission. They say, well, occasionally I've noticed that we're, getting together with this group of our friends and you don't show up a lot of the time anymore. Mm-hmm. And I miss you and I just wonder what's going on. Mm-hmm. that could just be maybe an easy way to raise the discussion.
I take it if this is your partner, your wife, your husband, you'd be talking about it sooner than this, and not like that.
Yeah, well, lawyers are telling us, there's survey research that they're saying over 50% of divorce cases involve the internet.
No kidding.
Whether it's infidelity or overuse. And I don't want to say that the internet is the cause of these marriage breakups, but it does stand to reason that when one or the other spouse is disenchanted or angry or bored or what have you, that within the confines of their own home, it's a place the person can go, whether to distract themselves or to find other relationships.
We're almost out of time. Any final thoughts of look out to people listening so they can be on guard for their own sliding into addiction or their partner's sliding?
Absolutely. I think an interesting exercise that I've done myself is to just Google internet addiction test. This is the one validated instrument that I'm aware of. You can plug in the answers to about 15 questions, and it'll generate an answer. How much impairment in your life? So that's the equivalent of taking your blood pressure. A lot of people would love to know, what's my blood pressure? Well, this is a way of finding out kind of empirically what level of concern might I have in my internet use. I guess the other is to do a kind of audit. Just answer for yourself, how am I using the internet? How often? Ask a trusted person. Do I seem like I use the internet in ways that get in the way? You're likely to get an honest
Take some
answer.
courage, though. I have a feeling your services will be more in demand 5 years from now even than they are now.
Well, I hope not, and if it's true, I'll certainly do my best to help people out.
David Lacocque, thanks very much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights.